It means a lot to me that you guys seem to love the Leviathans as much as I do. And I know, together, we can grow this Leviathan kingdom further into the true rulers of the Antiverse. And AC family, that's when my mind wandered over to the other side. I wondered, all this time, the Leviathans had been given the chance to dig to their heart's desires, perhaps dug out some impressive chambers and tunnels on the covered side of the terrarium. They had several days already to do so. What would we find behind these covered walls? Would we see an amazing network of tunnels and chambers full of brood? Would we see the Queen, our Titanic Empress again, behind these walls? The idea filled my heart with excitement and anxiousness. It was time to open it up. First, this sidebar. Wow! And now, the main large wall. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon. Welcome to the AC family. Enjoy.
Wait.
A commanding voice called from the other end of my anteroom.
Please, kindly bless us with a moment of your time. I have a small request to ask of thee, almighty creator of worlds.
It was the Crimson Queen, head of the Crimson Knights, my young colony of fire ants. I approached cautiously. What could the fire ant queen want of us? When I peered into the fire ant's test tube, which had been their nest since the very start of the colony's birth, a couple months back, my eyes widened as I saw the massive amount of brood the Crimson Queen had amassed in just the past week since I last checked up on her. Wow, an impressive brood pile, Your Majesty. What is it you would like, my Crimson Queen? I asked.
Release me
She replied with a hiss.
into Antopia.
She wanted to be set free into my yard. No, I'm afraid I can't do that, Your Majesty. The native ants of Antopia are beginning to win the Great Antopian War against you invasive ants. If I release you, I will be doing a great disservice to Team Native Ants and the entire ecosystem in my yard.
Rah!
The Crimson Queen snared, diving headfirst into her brood pile in defiance. She had quite the temper and was one to push the boundaries. Definitely a dangerous queen to never take your eyes off. I looked into their AC test tube portal. I noticed the fire ants had completely finished the roach I had given them the day before. The colony's large garbage pile lay on the opposite side. The colony was big now, so the colony's garbage production was also greater. I figured I'd appease our Crimson Queen with a food gift. So I opened the test tube portal and removed their old roach carcass and leftover pieces, replacing it with a newly freshly crushed roach. One of the fire ants had hitched a ride on the old roach carcass, so I had to catch it and place it back in. The colony was starting to get really big now and getting harder and harder to work with in their current setup. Immediately, the Crimson Knights showed up and began to defensively erect their gasters with powerful stingers in the air to celebrate their new feast that had dropped in from the skies. In the past, I never really saw fire ants doing this. This was probably the first time I've seen this vertical gaster behavior in my fire ants. More and more workers appeared to help deal with the food. This huge carcass would surely nourish the fire ants well. The Crimson Queen spoke again.
Okay. If you refuse to release me, I have another request. As you can imagine, a brood pile as large as ours has become somewhat cumbersome in this current space. Our garbage pile now infringing in on our hunting area.
Indeed, she was right.
I kindly ask you to please create for us our next home kingdom.
Suddenly, I felt my eyes being guided to the right.
We, the Crimson Knights, wish to move here.
The fire ants wanted to move into Marauder's Alley? old home to the Leviathans? Oh man. Why on earth would the fire ants request such a thing? It did feel like the Crimson Queen was up to something. I just couldn't figure out what. But it wasn't like she was asking to be moved into the new Leviathan's tank, currently housing the Leviathans. As we've seen in previous videos, our Crimson Queen has expressed a distaste for our Leviathans, with intentions to one day completely annihilate them. But no, not now, it seemed. She was simply asking to move into the Leviathan's old home. Sounds harmless. Plus, it was kind of like terrarium recycling, I guess. Less work for me. Alright, I see no harm in that. Your wish is my command, Your Majesty, Crimson Queen. I shall make the necessary preparations. I fetched a giant test tube. This would be the Crimson Knight's future nest space. I then got a bowl of bioactive cocoa fiber and proceeded to fill the test tube with the cocoa fiber, packing it in well. I then injected some water to moisten the medium to make it more attractive a living space for the ants. Then with what I call the notorious stick from hell, I created a starting tunnel deep into the medium. This starting tunnel will help the ants out with nest construction. Then I proceeded to remove the cotton, blocking the hole, which used to house the Leviathans. The ground around the hole collapsed as I conjured a giant sinkhole. I then placed the test tube securely into the hole. And just like that, all was set. The fire ants' future nest home in Marauder's Alley was ready. The ants could begin to dig into the cocoa fiber to move their brood and colony deep into the test tube. If I knew fire ants, they would move into the space in no time and quickly make it their own. I actually felt the Crimson Knights would really like this new spacious home, with the opportunity to actually dig for the first time in their lives. I covered the test tube with dark Bristol board to make it more homey and attractive to the fire ants for nesting. And now, all was set. I resolved to return the next morning after they had finished their meal. They would be needing the nourishment and energy for their great emigration into their new home in Marauder's Alley. I agreed with the Queen that it was actually a good time to move them into a new setup. They had reached the next stage in their development and were no longer just a fledgling colony. They were about to truly explode now, and the fire ants knew it.
Perfect.
The Queen cackled as she plopped out an egg, which a worker snatched from her cloaca, a new addition to her ever-growing fiery army. I could feel our Crimson Queen and her Crimson Knights were up to something, but I just couldn't pinpoint what. Little did I know, I would soon find out. One of the Queen's workers gave her a taste of some fresh roach juices as I left the colony to enjoy their last meal in their current home in private. The next morning, I approached the Crimson Knights. They had finished their roach and were ready for the emigration into Marauder's Alley. I looked at the colony in their test tube, and the Crimson Knights were clamoring to prepare for the big move. This AC test tube connector here would be the colony's point of freedom within the terrarium. The time has come for the great emigration, my Crimson Queen. I placed the entire setup into Marauder's Alley and proceeded to unplug the colony and place its open end, disconnecting the AC test tube adapter up against the cocoa fiber of their new larger test tube. And AC family, almost immediately, the fire ants began to mobilize, moving out the brood into their new home. I couldn't believe these fire ants. It's been a while since I've kept them and forgot just how willingly fire ants are willing to move into a new and foreign space in an instant. Unlike my Marauder ants, the Leviathans, who take days or weeks to trust a new potential nesting space area before finally deciding to move in, fire ants will seize the opportunity to move into a better living space immediately. It's almost like their philosophy is, move now, think later. I guess this is what happens when you have ants armed with incredibly potent stingers. They're confident that if a predator were to be lying in wait in their soon-to-be home, they'd just have to kill it by stinging it to death. I also feel where the ants are originally from, i.e., the Amazon rainforest, it often floods, so being willing to move to a new nest space quickly and efficiently is a great survival characteristic for the species. Guess fire ants are one of the world's top invasive ants for a reason. Adaptability, fearlessness, and potent venom. Some ants decided they preferred the old test tube better. But this was all part of how ants work. Soon they'd all be on the same page, moving the brood out. I almost missed the Crimson Queen slipping in. But I caught her. In she went, trying to move unnoticed. The ants continued to dig the tunnel wider, so to fit the entire colony. But peeking into the hole, it was kind of funny to see that the queen was a bit stuck. I guess the tunnel was still too tight, and the ants had moved in too quickly. So the queen had to simply wait patiently while the Crimson Knights widened the tunnel. Am I bad for finding that a bit funny? But it was still pretty cool to see how fire ants were such go-getters when it came to survival. In terms of the rest of the brood, still in the test tube, they had decided to keep it within the test tube for now, until they were able to widen the tunnel and fit the entire colony in. Regardless, I knew the Crimson Knights were happier now, more in their element, and would totally settle in nicely. But little did I know, the fire ants had successfully executed a big part of their secret plans. I would soon find out what those crazy plans were, and that these ants were smarter than I ever realized. I came back several hours later to check up on their progress. Checking on the test tube, all brood had been moved out now. A single Crimson Knight surveying the old home for who knows what. But what I really wanted to see was what it looked like in their new test tube. The entire colony was surely in here now. Opening the nest. Whoa! There the ants were, with brood coagulating the main tunnel at certain places. And there's the queen. Interesting that within the past few hours, within the test tube, the fire ants didn't bother to tunnel outwards, forming horizontal branches from the main vertical tunnel, which was what I thought they'd do. It seemed for now a main vertical tunnel was enough for them, and their Crimson Queen.
Thank you.
The Crimson Queen uttered.
This home is perfect. You have been just so kind, O Creator of worlds. It's exactly what we've needed.
I could see the brood cradled nicely now, in hydrated pockets of cocoa fiber walls, which acted like soft pillows for the babies. The ants simply created narrow passageways around these brood groupings, allowing the ants to quite easily pass by and organize the babies in what seemed like a much more natural manner. I loved watching the ants tend to the brood, carry cocoa fiber pieces, eggs, pupae, and more. It was all really nice to see. When I was finished watching them, I covered up the test tube to keep them in the dark and comfortable. Inside, I loved this new fire ant colony. I proceeded to remove the remaining test tubes and test tube adapter from the terrarium and began to shape the pit leading to their nest a little, because there was one thing I needed to do to tie this entire terrarium together to truly make this the fire ants' new kingdom. I placed in a great skull of a velociraptor to complete the new look and feel of this newly inhabited terrarium. To me, I always felt fire ants were like mini velociraptors, just voracious, aggressive, fast, smart, and a powerful force to not mess with. The next day, I returned to the terrarium, which had a different feel now that I knew it was inhabited by the Crimson Knights. This was no longer Marauder's Alley. This was now Fire Alley. And it occurred to me that the fact that our fire ants had moved into the old home of our Marauder ant colony was an event that actually happens regularly in the wild. Fire ants often attack, invade, and displace native ants, which make them a very lethal opponent to other ants. It was now time to feed the Crimson Knights. I placed in a freshly chopped up roach, I wanted to see them emerge to trail and feed. But strangely, even after 30 minutes, no ants emerged. What? I decided I would peek into the test tube again. What? No. Hope you can subscribe to the channel as we upload every Saturday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video to help us keep making more. It's Ant Love, forever.